now return to the past vehicles I've used. In the previous video, I've mentioned that I've been having to deal with my high anxiety over the course of my life. High anxiety happens to be manageable, but I didn't want the help of it, on account that I didn't want to take prescribed drugs, until today. FYI, these vehicle problems were before my rail fanning days, and before I accepted the needed help. The first vehicle I drove was a 1999 GMC Jimmy, which I mainly used to get me and sometimes my brother to and from school. It was dependable for a while, but there were already some ongoing issues with it. For example, one of the wheel bearings were bad, which activated the automatic braking system, or ABS. It was okay for the most part when I used it in the first few months, but on the way to school one morning in the dead of winter, it nearly took a turn for the worse. The roads were a bit slick as they had a fresh layer of snow one winter in 2020. Heading south on 38th Street, I was preparing to make a right turn onto 134th Avenue to head west, but as I slowed down to turn, the bad wheel bearing activated the ABS and I nearly slid into another car or into a ditch. That triggered my anxiety, which shook me up. Fortunately for me, I was meeting my mom at OK Tire so she can drop off her Chevrolet Suburban for repairs. From there, she drove my GMC Jimmy for the rest of the day, until at the end of my school day. The wheel bearing was eventually fixed, and no other problems arose. However, that bad wheel bearing was only the cherry on top for what was about to happen next. Months after I graduated in 2021, I was on my way to some job interview training in Holland. I was taking Byron Road to Chicago Drive in Zeeland, which was pretty busy at the time, seeing it was the evening commute. I was in the outer lane and I wanted to get to the inner lane, so with my turn indicator to merge left blinking, I found my opening in traffic and hit the accelerator. But in doing so, my GMC Jimmy started sputtering as it started to slow, going from I think 50 or 45 to 35 miles an hour. I needed to get back to the outer lane and onto the shoulder to stop. With cars whizzing by and car horns honking, I managed to get out from the inner lane to the outer lane and then onto the shoulder, bringing the GMC Jimmy to a complete and safe stop. I called my parents for help and they were on the way. But in the middle of all that was going on, my anxiety rose, and somewhere in all that, I might have had a panic attack, given that I was on a busy road with cars and trucks whizzing by. Thankfully, my mom picked me up and my GMC Jimmy was towed back home by my mom and dad later in the day. But I ended up missing job interview training as a result. My GMC Jimmy was taken back to OK Tire, where they found that the catalytic converter was all gunked up, which would explain why I hit the accelerator hard to merge into the open spot on the inner lane. It was cut off and replaced with a big plain pipe at home as a result, saving me hundreds. But yet another problem on my GMC Jimmy rose. As I braked to put it in park, the brake light came on, indicating a problem. Turns out the brake line was worn out, leaking brake fluid. Thankfully, this happened at home and not on the road, or I would have been in a runaway car with no brakes. It was taken back to OK Tire, where the old brake line was overhauled and replaced with a new one. However, the amount of debt on the car repairs I had was adding up. Seeing how I didn't have a job at one point, and I was only working odd jobs to put gas in my car. However, one more breakdown would do it in for good. Another or the same wheel bearing was knocked out, I couldn't be sure what, but the cost of the repairs that were needed were astronomical. In 2022, my GMC Jimmy was sent back to the shop yet again, and the cost of the repair was set at around $1,500. So there was no choice but to throw in the towel at this point. The vehicle was sold at around $500, and I had to work off the repair debt I owed. I thought I had seen the last of those problems, but the next one I had will not only be the worst of them all, but it'll send me back a long way. It would also prove to be one of my darkest days in history.